Dan Banks. I'm here to talk to you today about how I worked with ChatGPT to really figure out how to access the live raw data within Matomo. And there was a couple of reasons why I did that. And one of them was Matomo offers fantastic dashboards and reporting tools, but sometimes you just want to, excuse me, sometimes you really just want to be able to get to the live data. And I am not a programmer, and I didn't want to really engage with any programmers on this. So I wanted to see if there was a way that I could create a simple program to give me that information. And so for the next several minutes, what I'm going to do is walk you through that conversation and provide you with a real-time use case of working with ChatGPT to get me to a particular point. And what's really interesting about this is the journey doesn't end, right? It's never ending. So every day I find a way to improve the process and improve the ability to actually get to the data. So be it whether it's adding prompts to make it easier for me, or whether it's addressing a different way to ingest the data, whether it's CSV or JSON, what have you. And then on the other side of this presentation, I'm going to talk about a tool that I came across in trying to identify a way to view my data differently. And what I mean by that is I work with a lot of wholesale distributors, and I have over the last 20 plus years, in identifying what their needs are from a software standpoint, right? And one of the challenges that every one of them come across is, how do I look at my data, right? Well, there's BI tools, there's analytics tools, there's certainly availability out there. Well, when COVID hit, there was a mass rush to build these websites. And many of these people have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to create a digital or online experience for their users, for their customers. The challenge being there's a disconnect between what's happening online and what's happening offline. Now, certainly there are ways to connect to ERPs to drive sales into the ERP, read customer data, what have you. But what you're really missing is how the customer is interacting online, but not necessarily purchasing, not necessarily buying from you. So my goal as I'm looking at this is, one, Matomo provides the unique experience, I would say, of being able to track kind of that authenticated user, right? That logged in user, that customer, and what they're doing. And the opportunity here, as I'm trying to build, is identify a way to merge the data, right? Map the data together. So the tool I'm going to show you is how I'm going about that journey. It's something called Nomic Atlas. Nomic is a company out of New York that has built a couple different things. They've built something called ChatGPT for All, which is actually a downloadable GPT that for your desktop. So you're able to actually point it to directories within your within your own local environment and have your own AI chatbot. So there's that. But on top of that, besides that, they built this thing called Atlas. And I'm going to talk about Atlas with you. And I've actually built a throughput of bringing the data down from Matomo, translating it into a way that Atlas ingests it. And then we're going to talk about how that is viewable. So before we begin, I want to apologize for being late. Unfortunately, I live on the East Coast and we go through something called daylight savings time. I can't wait till they end it. But in my mind, this was happening at 11 a.m. But because of daylight savings time, this is what occurred. So I apologize. And I hope we have fun on this trip today as we go through this. I'm actually going to walk you through a conversation I had with ChatGPT and how it started. So if there's any questions to start, are they asking live or are we chatting those questions, Ronan and Enzo?
They are asking, there is no question in the chat, but if there is question, okay, I will tell you and I will put them in the big blue button chat.
Great. About how many people do we have joining with us today?
Oh, I don't have the value. You may ask Ronan Chardonnay.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So I'm just going to make sure that we can all see the presentation. Can everyone see this?
Sorry, I think you can continue your talk.
You're able to see the presentation?
Yes, for sure.
All right, perfect. So as we look at this, I started off a conversation very simply. Build an API call to access data from Matomo. Now, certainly that exists right within the API documentation. There's some tools out there that you can use to build this, but I wanted to be able to run this locally on my machine, and I wanted to be able to make changes to it as I needed. So the conversation started off very simply building an API call to access data from Matomo. This is the actual prompt I used. So this is what really came back from ChatGPT. It came back with a couple answers, but at the end of that answer, what it said was, would you like a code example on how to make the API call using Python? Now, Python is a programming language that really ChatGPT understands very well. And it also is able to provide very simple script in Python. So Python is a downloadable program that you can get access to very easily. You can download it to your desktop and you can set up an environment. And it's not hard at all to do this. It's very straightforward. And I'm happy to post this presentation. If anyone reaches out via email or via conversation, we can certainly walk you through how to do that, making it simple. But the idea again here was, how do I do this? I'm not a programmer. Provide me with a way to do that. So I went through and had this conversation, and it's kicked off with just a quick, this is how you do it. Import the requests, and this is a standard format of the Matomo API. Now, what was very interesting was it had within its data set, its understanding, right? It's training exactly what I was asking. So it knew when I said build something API call from Matomo, it went and it understood exactly what structure it would need. Well, now I said, well, that's great. We've actually built it. Now I want to do something with it, right? I don't want to just make a data call. I want to export it to a CSV file. And so very straightforward. It now said, well, make these adjustments to your code. And within this presentation, and I will share this presentation, I'm showing the code because it's very straightforward. And if you are able to code and you understand that, you'll see that there's some changes you can easily make by yourself to address and change what you're looking to do. But again, I want to stress I'm not a programmer. So we continued this conversation. And of course, with every type of program, every type of coding, there's an error. And so if you're currently working with ChatGPT to build any code or any AI tool, I encourage you, as I did here, with it, to simply take the error and drop it in or copy and paste it directly into the conversation, because it's going to review that and understand what the challenge is. And so it simply came back and it said, here's updated code to fix that. And again, the conversation continues to, what am I looking to achieve? Right. And so again, there's an error. So you're going to get errors. You're going to come back and forth and get these errors. And the reality is it's going to be a little bit frustrating at times as you go through this process, but it gives you the opportunity to understand the programming as it's getting put back to you, especially if you're not a programmer. So it said it sees the issue. It says needs to create a file on my desktop, adjust the path accordingly. So it says, okay, create this code, drop this into right onto your desktop. So now I said, well, now that we've gotten that straight away, now that we've gotten that figured out, what I want to now do is I want to take a specific API and I want to include that and download it into a CSV so that I can review that data the way I want to see it. So now it came back and it gave me exactly what I was looking for from a standpoint of what the parameters were and what the information is. And it left, the information that was important to me such as, the auth token, the private stuff, where I would put that in because you don't want to share that as you're going through this process. You don't want to share any specific information regarding this. As I go through this, now I'm saying, well, you didn't put it in the CSV file, so I would still like the data in a CSV file. And I'm showing you this actual conversation because I think that the reality is, if you are clear in your expectations when you're developing this, when you're working with ChatGPT on these type of things, it really does understand and work with you to present you with what you're looking for. So that it came back and it gave me a full program to continue down the path of what we want to include from the name of the CSV file. You can call this function with the action type authentication token. So it provided me with a way to go ahead and build and develop this program. So I want to stop here for a minute and just kind of give you a live demonstration of exactly what I'm talking about here. We'll get to Nomic next, but what I really want to show you is this in live production and show you how I've now taken this conversation, which started out with a very simple statement: build me an API call to Matomo, and what I've been able to do continually. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen for a minute, and I'll be able to share that again. Just going to pull up my program here and see if there's any conversations, any questions at this point.
No, there is no questions actually.
Okay, perfect. All right. So now you see my command prompt, right?
Yes, we can see your command prompt.
Okay. So the first thing is I want to get access to, so I'm going to run a program that I wrote called Matomo, and it's in Python, and this is just on my command prompt. So again, I'm not in any type of coding interface. I'm just using my standard Windows command prompt. And it comes back to me and it says, do I want it in CSV or JSON format? And I'm going to say I want it in JSON. And what are my dates? I'm going to put it in the date value. I'm going to enter my domain. And I just need to grab my token, and I don't care if you hit this token. I'll change it after this presentation. And so what we have here is data written to visitor details .json, right? Now, if I wanted that to be instead, I wanted that to be CSV. So dropped it into a CSV file, just like that. And so, stop sharing again here real quick. Bear with me, I just want you to see what I was doing per se here. And again, I apologize for not being fully prepared based on the timing. Okay, so the actual API I was going after was the search, exit after search, and you'll see it dropped it right into the CSV. So in doing this, this is great, right? I have a script behind this, very straightforward in a text format, um, and I would have to go back and change that, right, back and forth if I want to change the API. So I wanted to make this a better user experience for myself. So what I did instead was what I did was I made my experience better for myself. And I said, okay, now we're going to instead, I'm going to say that I want to get the live data, and the call I want to use, site ID. And by the way, now what I've done is I've also put my site token and the URL is in a separate file now, so it reads that. So we went from having a simple conversation from build a Matomo API call to now I'm actually creating a program that allows me to interact with it as a user in the way that I want to get to the data. And it's going to take a second to do that. So while it's building that JSON file, because it's getting 10,000 records, we're going to talk about Nomic for a minute. So Nomic is a tool that allows you to visualize your data differently. So as we think about the dashboards and all that great information that provides, Nomic is a way to take unstructured data and actually make some decisions about it using artificial intelligence. So it uses certain algorithms to determine based on the way that words are grouped together. The very technical term is called embedding, and it uses a way to identify how to create relationships, data within its training model. So if I think about what Atlas really is it's an enterprise ML data platform. And just to be clear, I'm not a sales rep for these guys, any kind of referral fee. I just found this. I've talked to them, identify kind of some of the use cases I'm talking about. I'm excited about what they're working on. This is fairly new in the case that I'm presenting to them. But the idea here is being able to create, curate, visualize, and interpret data at scale. So depending on who's on the call with us, you may have some you may be working with some very large data sets and wanting to figure out how to visualize certain data points within that. This would be an excellent tool to take a look at and see if it meets your needs on that. So really, data is unstructured, hidden. There's really not a really good way to organize and extract value from unstructured data sets, such as conversations, right? If you think about if you have a type of situation where there's a chatbot, right, from your website, and there's a lot of chats that are going back and forth. Well, that's kind of unstructured data, right? There's a lot of hidden meaning and information within that. There's also the idea of looking at potentially video and audio if you work within those industries, and being able to get to that data in a quicker, more efficient manner, right? It's very slow right now within the data realm. And there's really not a good training model for that. So it causes poor performance out of the box. So with this allows you to do is ingest unstructured data from all different kinds of databases and different kinds of files. And I know this looks all very technical, and we may have some very technical people on the phone with us, but the reality is I figured out how to use this, and I figured out how to build a structure of the data to view in different ways. So the reality is anyone can do this. It's not difficult. It uses standard applications to move the data back and forth. You can build applications on top of it calling the data. So any type of search tool that you might want to utilize when accessing the data, you can do so via API. So there's a lot of potential here, and I'll share the link in the presentation that I share. But the idea here was I wanted to see my data differently than what currently exists within the Matomo platform. So if we go back to my files here, all right, we'll see it got written to the JSON file. So now what I've done is there's another Python program that I have that allows me to now write it to the Nomic platform. And I'm going to show you what this looks like actually in that platform. So it's asking me for what the name of my JSON file is, what I want to call this. It gives me a list of all the indexable fields. So I like action details, has a lot of good information in there. I'm going to pop this on, and I'm going to tell Atlas to build what's called a topic model. So it's going to take that unstructured data that sits within that action details, because there's a lot of information in there, and it's going to decide and make decisions based on that. So while that's running, you'll see here that it's uploading the text Atlas. All right, so now we have a map that's been created. So let's go look at that map. All right, so here is an example of my data set. So the one thing is I've built a lot of different ones. You can play and do some interesting things in here. But here's one which is based on the exits that happened, right? So if I go look at this, I have my data preview, I have my mapping, and it's showing me all that information. But if I open this map, I told it to build kind of its own understanding of my data. And so very quickly, I can see which pages my customers are exiting from, or what's the subject matter potentially of the page that they're exiting from. And what's cool about this is I can drill down into a particular set of data. So I can say, just show me the returns. And so here's all the returns. And as I hover over it, you'll see now the data on the side come up. And these are all the different data points that we pulled in from that JSON. And so how to return an item is the label here. And it understood from feeding it how to, I would say, label or give a topic to that data. Now, the one thing I will say is sometimes it makes decisions based on its data set that doesn't necessarily give you exactly what you're looking for. So one of the things that they're building is the ability to kind of label your own data and build your own kind of topic based on how you want it to appear. But the reality here is very quickly I can see across the board where my customers are exiting my site. And it's interactive. I can drill down into it. I can really get an understanding of where they were in their journey when they exited. So there is that capability. In addition to that, And I pulled this in a little while ago, this live data. And so we now have a very large map with 10,000 plus pieces to it. And so what I said here was I wanted to understand what the actions were, what they were taking, what they were viewing on the site during that month. And so it took all this unstructured data and it made some decisions about it. It said, well, there's a lot of individuals who were focused on island hunting. And I can come in here and I could say, all right, well, show me, which pages they were actually looking at and what are the actions that they took. How many actions did they take? What was the browser? So here's all that excellent data that Matomo has that you can now take using, that API call, ingest it into Atlas. And what's really interesting about Atlas is you can have your public data, these can be public maps, or you can have your own private maps. And, they charge a very nominal fee for that. But if you want to take your private data and put it to here and just look at it differently. And you'll notice as I was running through that program, it asked me some questions. What was my index field? So I can tell it which field I want to look at instead. Maybe it wasn't action details, maybe index and look at specifically my campaigns or my device types. And so you can build all different kinds of maps. And I've found this to be very interesting. I've actually been working with one of my customers to view their customers and their search history and capabilities. So here's the data that we just dumped in. Took a few minutes to build, but 10,000 records pretty quickly. And I told it to index on action details from a different time period from the other previous data. So I encourage you to take a look at Atlas Nomic, .ai. I encourage you to reach out to me. I can walk you through how to build these particular programs using the conversations I've had with ChatGPT, the scripts. I have a few different things there. But really the idea here is how do you get to your data through a simple program, and then what you can do with that data, right? Once you have it in JSV, you can ingest it into any of your BI platforms if you're using Tableau, or if you're using your Power BI or others. And so I know we're be about maybe 5 or 10 minutes early here. I want any questions. But my goal was to show you in a working way, a very non-presentation kind of way, just, hey, this is how I use this. This is a way that Matomo can give you more. Okay, any coming across the chat?
There are no questions actually. Let me check. No question.
Okay. Well, I hope this was something that you can take back and find some value in. I will provide my presentation to the Matomo crew so they can share it. And links, it'll include some additional information as well. But I really do encourage you to take a look at this particular tool. I think it's definitely something from a visual standpoint and a simplicity standpoint, gives you to identify key data points, see how they relate to each other, understand the, I guess I would say the overall effect a particular data point has on another. So. All right.
As there is a question, do you have any repo you can share with simple examples? It's a question by George.
Yeah, report with simple examples. What kind of data would you like to see in that? So one of the ones that I think would be what I would say would be a simple example, and I did go through it rather quickly, but might be being able to pull the details of the search exits. So here's an example of the segments, the exits. So this is the data that tells you the exit rate per page. Would that be what you were talking about, George, or were you looking for something a little bit different? Another way to possibly view the data this way. One of the actions that occur. So instead of we look at this one, let's look at another map I built. Matomo here. And so this was all based on custom variables. Do any of you within your Matomo platform use custom variables? That's a way to think about how you might look at your data is based on all the different variables that you've put out there. So I pulled that in from the live visitor details. That's part of the actual data set. Details driven. Or I told it, in this case, I told it to point at the custom variables to show me this information. So in the way that I pulled that data, we'll give you an example of the export of how that looked. Show you exactly what I mean by that. Give you a sense of what I viewed here. So here's an example of the JSON file that you can pull in, right? So this is the JSON being downloaded or being pulled in. So this is an actual website that gives you that information. So there's a lot of opportunity to work with your data from Matomo in different ways. Code implementation in GitHub. Okay, so I haven't done anything in GitHub for this. I literally am running this on my local machine. I haven't put it out to any other place yet. I've been working on this. But when I shared it with Ronan, it was interesting because there wasn't a lot of functionality out there that was, I guess, simple to use from an API standpoint that allowed you to just put the data in the CSV and other types of files. So this was a use case I had, and I have been working with Matomo for several years, and I found this to be something that I thought would be useful for others. But no GitHub. But if you would like to connect and we could work to get something in the GitHub, happy to do it. Any other questions?
No more questions, actually. If you guys have some question, you can ask to Dan. And
Well, I hope this provided some value and it was interesting to everyone.
yeah, thank you very much to be here. That was very interesting.
And like I said, I'll share my slides. And it will include a number of the URLs. I'll also include my contact information. So
Okay, perfect. So I will stop the record and the stream.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much to be here, and I will cut the live.
Do you think that went well?
Yes, perfect.
Okay.